cold wind whipped against the grey stone walls of the Tower of London. On the small courtyard of execution, a young girl walked trembling, her pale face unable to hide the fear that consumed her. They say that before being led to the scaffold, she picked up a block of wood, rested her head upon it, rehearsing her death, as if convincing herself that the end awaiting her was nothing more than a gesture, a ritual, and nothing else. On that day, February 13th, 1542, Katherine Howard, the young Queen of England, knelt down and laid her head upon the cold block. The blade fell, and in an instant, her life was over, before she had even reached the age of 20. But how could a girl of 17, who had only just stepped into the palace in splendor, fall so swiftly into ruin? How could a rose once praised as without thorns be crushed by the very hands that once cherished her? To understand that fate, we must turn back the clock, to a childhood of neglect, to youthful affairs that seemed innocent but turned into a death sentence, and to a court where love was nothing more than the last move in a ruthless game of power. Before the story begins, don't forget to subscribe so we can journey together into the lives of those who changed history and uncover the secrets that no textbook has ever told. Katherine Howard was born around 1523, the daughter of Lord Edmund Howard and Joyce Culpeper. By blood, she belonged to one of England's most prestigious noble families, niece to the powerful Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, and kin to two of King Henry VIII's former wives, Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour. Yet that glittering lineage offered her little comfort. Instead of a childhood of stability and privilege, Katherine grew up under the long shadows of poverty and neglect. Her father, Edmund Howard, was an ineffectual nobleman, drowning in debt and lacking both political skill and the means to support his family. Her mother, Joyce Culpeper, died while Katherine was still young, leaving behind a household full of children. With a father incapable of guiding her and a mother lost too soon, Katherine became one of many children swept aside in the slow decline of the Howard line. She was not raised with the affection or discipline expected for a noble daughter, but rather left at the mercy of her family's arrangements. Too helpless to raise her properly, her father placed Katherine in the household of Agnes Howard, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. Outwardly, it seemed an honorable home, an environment where a young noblewoman might learn refinement, virtue, and the skills required for life at court. But the reality was far different. Agnes was elderly and overburdened, juggling the duties of upholding the family's name while overseeing numerous other girls in her care. Discipline in the household was lax and supervision nearly absent. The young women were left to their own devices, free to gather in secret, exchange flirtations with men, and sometimes embark on reckless romantic escapades with little restraint. Amid this atmosphere of freedom without guidance, Katherine grew like a wildflower on the edge of a noble garden. She lacked a strict moral or religious education, knew little of steady familial affection, and thus became an easy target for whispered promises and lingering glances. That neglected childhood, without structure or protection, planted the seeds of impulsive choices to come, decisions that might have seemed fleeting moments of weakness, but would ultimately lead her down a path toward an irredeemable tragedy. In the free-spirited world of Agnes Howard's household, Katherine entered her teenage years with the innocent curiosity of a girl just coming of age. She had never been firmly guided in matters of morality or proper conduct, nor had anyone clearly marked the delicate line between innocent affection and the hidden perils of youthful impulsiveness. It was in this environment that Katherine first became aware of Henry Manox, her music tutor. Older and worldly, he drew her attention through lessons that often slipped into private, intimate conversations. What developed between them was ambiguous, neither true love nor mere infatuation. But it was certainly an experience that went beyond ordinary childhood feelings. For Katherine, it was her first taste of adolescent passion, leaving a lasting impression on her tender heart. Yet Manox was only the beginning. Soon, Katherine met Francis Dereham, a young, ambitious, and self-assured secretary. While her connection with Manox had been brief, her bond with Dereham grew much deeper. There were confidences, whispered promises, even the use of husband and wife between them. In Tudor England, such vows carried weight, considered a form of unofficial commitment. For Katherine, Still under 20, it felt as though she had finally found a safe harbor for the heart that had long gone without affection. But this attachment was far from harmless. The pledges, the whispered words, and later the rumors surrounding her relationship with Dereham became dangerous evidence against her. At the time, she believed she was simply savoring the passionate moments of youth, unaware that these very moments would later become deep fissures in her life. In Tudor society, where a woman's purity defined her honor, Catherine's private teenage experiences unwittingly planted the seeds of tragedy. In hindsight, these early bonds might seem like fleeting breezes in the life of a dreamy young girl. Yet, as she stepped into the ruthless world of the English court, those very secrets became blades, ever ready to strike at the height of her power. As Catherine neared adulthood, the ambitious Howard family, ever eager to expand their influence at court, began to take notice of her. They saw in her youthful beauty and innocent charm a potential political asset. Soon, Catherine was appointed as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII's fourth wife, marking her first real entrance into the dazzling yet treacherous world of the English royal court. The Tudor court was a crowded stage of schemes and intrigue. Though Anne of Cleves held the title of queen, she had failed to capture Henry's heart. Their marriage had been arranged as a political alliance with European powers, yet to Henry she was a stranger, unattractive, distant, and unable to provide what he craved: devotion, vitality, and the feeling of being truly desired. In the cold shadow of this marriage, Catherine's presence was like a sudden spring breeze, awakening the weary heart of a king growing tired and restless. Henry VIII was no longer the young man who had captivated Europe with his power and charisma. Now 50, his body swollen from indulgence, his movements hampered by illness and his feet racked with painful ulcers, the king had grown irritable, quick to anger, and seemingly drained of joy. Yet in Catherine's eyes, Henry was not ailing or aged. With her gentle grace, playful charm, and lively conversation, she made him forget his physical pains and the disappointments of previous marriages. Catherine was more than beautiful. She had the gift of making Henry feel desired, powerful, and capable of winning a young woman's heart. She laughed at his stories, listened intently to his complaints, and above all, gave the aging king the sense that with her, he had regained a lost youth. Among the stern faces and watchful eyes of the court, Catherine became a light in Henry's life, a sweet refuge from the cold politics around him. For the Howards, this budding relationship was a rare stroke of luck. They saw Catherine not as a niece to protect, but as a strategic pawn, knowing that if she became queen, the family would gain immense influence at court. Her innocence and beauty had unwittingly made her a piece in the Tudor power game, thrust onto the board of a ruthless struggle for dominance. Unaware of the full scope of their schemes, Catherine surrendered to the king's favor, believing in the sincerity of their bond. Yet every step she took was already charted by her family's ambitions. What appeared to be romance was, in truth, a bridge to the throne, a path that would eventually lead her to a tragic and fleeting fate. In 1540, when Henry VIII's marriage to Anne of Cleves officially ended, the English court was thrown into turmoil. Just months later, another wedding unfolded. But this time, the bride was no foreign princess. She was Katherine Howard, 17 years old, radiant and innocent. The ceremony shone with the full grandeur of the Tudor court, yet what captivated all was the striking contrast between bride and groom. On one side stood a king in his 50s, ailing, overweight, and already marked by 4 failed marriages. On the other, a young maiden, delicate, fresh, and brimming with life. Yet Henry saw in her the very elixir to revive his aging heart, a living symbol of the enduring power and allure of a king. From the moment she became queen, Catherine was showered with unprecedented favor. Henry bestowed upon her the finest gowns, the most dazzling jewels, and opulent palaces where she could revel in endless pleasures. In remarkably little time, her wardrobe and jewelry collection eclipsed those of all previous queens. Banquets followed in quick succession, with Catherine always at the center, both the king's prized jewel and the object of admiration and envy within the court. Yet such brilliance did not automatically earn respect. Catherine's playful spirit and lavish habits soon drew the disapproval of the king's counselors. To them, a queen was meant to be wise, composed, and dignified. embodying the gravity of the throne. But Catherine, still so young, seemed only to savor the sudden luxuries and delights as though they might vanish at any moment. Tension grew when Catherine failed to conceive. Months passed, and the hope of a male heir began to fade. Henry VIII, fixated on producing a son, often blamed his wives when disappointment struck. Rumors began to circulate, questioning not only the young queen's capabilities, but even the vitality of the king himself. Catherine's position suddenly felt precarious. If she could not provide an heir, Henry's passionate devotion might quickly evaporate. What Catherine had yet to realize was that the very favor lavished upon her was a double-edged sword. To the courtiers, she was a reckless girl elevated too high. To the Howard family, she was a pawn in a game of political influence. And in Henry's eyes, love could swiftly turn into ruthless suspicion. Even crowned with glittering splendor, Catherine stood on a delicate bridge where the smallest misstep could plunge her into a tragic abyss. When Katherine Howard rose to the throne as queen, she was enveloped in the brilliance of grandeur and the unwavering favor of Henry VIII. Yet beneath this dazzling exterior, shadows from her past began to resurface. And it was her own innocence and recklessness that set in motion a chain of events destined for tragedy. Rumors of her former relationship with Francis Dereham, her childhood companion in all but name, refused to stay buried. When Dereham entered royal service, whispers spread that the Queen's attention toward him went beyond mere acknowledgement of his talents, suggesting a more intimate bond. In the ever-watchful Tudor court, such murmurs were like sparks, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Even more perilous was Catherine's affair with Thomas Culpeper, one of the king's most trusted courtiers. Young, handsome, and completely relied upon by Henry, Culpeper had unprecedented access to the king, tending to him during illness and accompanying him on hunts. This closeness drew Catherine into a whirlwind of desire. She was said to be captivated by his strength and charm, while he, in turn, could not resist her youthful beauty and radiance. From whispered exchanges, their connection deepened into secret meetings, carefully orchestrated to evade the vigilant eyes of the court. But the Tudor palace was never a safe haven for secrets. Every wall had ears. Every gesture was observed. Catherine and Culpeper believed that cunning and the protection of a few loyal allies could shield them. Yet they underestimated the ruthless politics and malice lurking in the court. The love letters Catherine sent to Culpeper, filled with tender words and longing, became undeniable proof. To an onlooker, they spoke of a young woman in love. But to the law and the court, they were confessions of treachery. The danger escalated as others became entangled. Jane Boleyn, widow of George Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's brother, was reportedly instrumental in arranging Catherine's secret meetings with Culpeper. Having survived the horrific fall of Anne, Jane now found herself caught in another deadly web. Her involvement allowed the scandal to spread, turning a hidden affair into a complex tangle, implicating multiple figures within the court. Catherine may never have fully understood the peril she faced. To her, these clandestine meetings were a balm for the emotional void left by Henry VIII, whose failing health and advancing years could no longer provide the warmth she desired. She longed for attention, for the passion of youth, and Culpeper offered it all. Yet in Tudor society, where a queen embodied the honor and purity of the royal family, any betrayal was considered treason. Gradually, the rumors ceased to be quiet whispers. They became daggers aimed squarely at Catherine. The Howard family's political enemies, long resentful of the Queen's favor, seized the opportunity to strike down the rose without thorns. While Catherine chased her fleeting, reckless pleasures, the court was already weaving a trap, ready to ensnare her. This was not merely the fall of a naive young woman. It was the moment that sealed the destiny of a queen. Through these secret passions, Catherine unwittingly drafted her own indictment, one that no power, not even Henry VIII's favor, could ever erase. The truth behind Catherine's secrets was finally brought into the light, and in the harshest, most merciless manner imaginable. John Lascelles, a courtier nursing a long-standing grudge against the Howard family, chose this moment to launch a scandalous accusation. He claimed that the young queen had not been a virgin when she married Henry VIII. In a court already thick with intrigue and suspicion, this allegation ignited the atmosphere like a spark in a powder keg. The king, still smarting from Anne Boleyn's betrayal, could not dismiss such shocking rumors about the teenage wife he had cherished. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer was tasked with a secret inquiry. With calculated precision, Cranmer collected testimony from Catherine's attendants, those who had witnessed or at least heard whispers of her shadowed past. Initially skeptical, he found that each line of questioning only revealed more troubling evidence, enough to make even his steely composure falter. Witnesses claimed that Francis Dereham had boasted of an intimate relationship with Catherine during her youth, even referring to her as his wife. When interrogated, Dereham could not fully deny these claims, tightening the figurative noose around the Queen's neck. The most damning evidence emerged with the discovery of love letters exchanged between Catherine and Thomas Culpeper. In these letters, she wrote with fervent longing, confessing desire, and arranging secret meetings. To the court, these were no idle words of a young, infatuated girl. They were undeniable proof of adultery. As queen, any betrayal amounted to treason. Culpeper, crushed under relentless questioning, could no longer conceal the truth. The clandestine encounters once hidden beneath the cover of night were now laid bare before Tudor justice. When Henry VIII learned of the scandal, he was seized by shock and despair. He had believed that Catherine's youthful love could revive what time had eroded in him, offering solace to his aging body and spirit. Instead, everything unraveled like a nightmare. Contemporary accounts describe the king wandering for days without eating or sleeping, lost in a haze of fury and grief, the sting of betrayal reopening old wounds from past marriages. Meanwhile, Catherine was confined to Hampton Court, a palace that had once resonated with music and feasts during her brief reign. Now its walls echoed only with her desperate cries. She is said to have run through the corridors, pleading for an audience with Henry, begging to explain herself, to seek forgiveness. But the king's heart had turned to stone. No response, no mercy. He left the young queen to confront despair alone. At 17 or 18, Catherine was no longer the innocent rose the court had admired. Her youth, beauty, and seemingly charming innocence had been recast as proof of recklessness and moral failing. The court, long eager to strike at the Howard family, quickly rallied to condemn her. The affair with Culpeper, coupled with the shadowy past with Dereham, coalesced into an unassailable indictment. As the investigation advanced, Catherine was left with nothing but raw, unrelenting fear. She understood that her fate was sealed, that no tears or pleas could sway the heart that had once loved her so passionately. The figure of Henry VIII, once her pillar and pride, had become a cold, unyielding judge, poised to pass the sentence that would end the life of his young, beautiful wife. When the evidence finally reached the point of conviction, the Tudor court erupted like a tempest. In the winter of 1541, those connected to Katherine Howard's scandal were summoned one by one before the law. Francis Dereham, her former lover who had once called her his wife in all but name, and Thomas Culpeper, a favored courtier of the king, were both sentenced to death. In a dynasty familiar with Henry VIII's ruthlessness, executions were routine, but the sheer savagery of these punishments stunned everyone. Culpeper, once the king's favorite, received a swift and merciful beheading. Dereham, however, faced no such leniency. He endured hanging, disembowelment, and quartering, a brutal fate reserved for traitors. When the news reached Catherine, panic overtook her, nearly breaking her composure. The walls of Hampton Court, and later the Tower of London, did more than confine her body. They crushed the fragile spirit of a girl not yet 20. She understood that with these men already condemned, her own downfall was inevitable. Meanwhile, the English Parliament could not remain silent. Under the king's pressure, a new law declared that any queen who failed to disclose premarital relationships with the king would be guilty of treason. This legal shift struck directly at Catherine, while sending a chilling warning to any future queen. Proof of adultery was unnecessary. Concealing a past liaison alone was sufficient for condemnation. Even Henry VIII, despite lingering affection, could not halt the tide. His pride was wounded, the honor of the crown tarnished, and the court demanded severity to maintain order. The young queen was stripped of all titles, from Queen of England to nothing more than a convicted criminal, and moved into the Tower of London, a place already steeped in the screams of the disgraced, including her own relative, Anne Boleyn. The days in the Tower were the darkest of Catherine's life. Historical accounts depict her teetering between despair and madness. Sometimes she wept, begging for an audience with the king. Other times, she succumbed to silent resignation. It is said she even requested instruction on how to position her head correctly on the block, so that when the moment came, she would not appear clumsy or fearful. The image of a girl not yet 20 rehearsing her own death stands as a haunting testament to Tudor cruelty. Her trial, if it could be called that, was little more than a ritual to legitimize a predetermined sentence. Catherine had scant opportunity to defend herself. The evidence, letters to culpability, Derham's testimony, and the king's heavy silence was already arranged. She became a mere shadow before the immense political machinery crushing her life. In the cold courtroom, Catherine heard her sentence, stripped of her title, convicted of treason, to be executed by beheading. The room seemed to freeze, not from surprise, but from the weight of relentless tragedy. Witnesses saw a trembling young girl, her eyes red with tears, yet trying to stand tall, clinging to the last shred of dignity amid utter humiliation. When she left the courtroom, the path to the scaffold lay before her. Tower Green, the blood-soaked ground of countless courtiers, awaited. Every step down the corridors, every click of the keys in their locks etched deeper the grim reality. Katherine Howard was no longer queen, no longer a rose without a thorn, but a prisoner awaiting her final day. From that moment, death was no longer a distant shadow. It drew closer with every breath. At just 19, Catherine had fallen with shocking speed from the highest station a woman in England could hold into an abyss of inescapable tragedy. On the morning of February 13th, 1542, London's sky hung heavy and gray, as if mourning the tragedy poised to unfold within the cold stone walls of the Tower of London. In that oppressive stillness, Katherine Howard, England's young queen, barely 19 or 21 according to some accounts, stepped forward to meet her final fate. The night before, she had requested a wooden block in her cell to rehearse how she would lay her head upon the executioner's scaffold. This was no idle whim. It was the careful, desperate preparation of a young woman determined to maintain some semblance of composure and dignity in her last moments. That rehearsal revealed a haunting awareness. She knew her path had led to the end, and she sought, at the very least, to conceal any trembling from public eyes. As the guards led Catherine to Tower Green, the same site where her cousin Anne Boleyn had met death, the air seemed to thicken with silence. Crowds had gathered, courtiers, soldiers, and ordinary citizens allowed to witness, watching her small, tentative steps. Gone were the silks and finery of a queen. Catherine wore a plain black gown, her hair loose, her face pale, yet her eyes held an eerie brightness, as if she had passed through every layer of fear, and now carried only resignation. Upon reaching the scaffold, Catherine knelt, her lips quivering as she whispered her final prayers. She made no loud proclamations of innocence, no accusations against others, only petitions for God's forgiveness, prayers for peace in her soul, and blessings for the king, the husband she had loved, feared, and betrayed. In that instant, the crowd fell utterly silent, even the wind seeming to pause, straining to hear the last words of a young queen on the edge of death. The executioner, masked and impassive, stepped forward, hand resting on the gleaming axe. Catherine, recalling her practice from the night before, slowly laid her head upon the block. She gripped her hands tightly, keeping her body from shaking. The moment stretched unbearably then. In a swift, precise stroke, it was over. Her delicate head fell, blood staining the wood, and a collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, part horror, part sorrow. Catherine's body was laid to rest in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower, alongside many other victims of Henry VIII. Tragically, she rested beside Anne Boleyn, her cousin and former queen, who had also lost her head there. Two women of the Howard family, once brilliant roses of the court, now silent beneath the cold earth. Her death left a deep wound in Henry VIII. Though he had ordered it, though he believed himself betrayed, the fact that a young woman he had once passionately loved had been led to the scaffold crushed him in grief. Historical accounts tell us that after Catherine's death, Henry sank into depression, tormented by remorse, and did not remarry for 18 months, a long time for a man renowned for both romantic and political pursuits. The tragedy echoed far beyond Henry's life. Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn and Catherine's cousin once removed, would later ascend the throne, haunted by the fates of these two women. She swore never to marry, having witnessed how love for a king could instantly turn into the blade of death. That vow shaped the legend of the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I, who ruled England with brilliance for decades, yet remained forever solitary upon her throne. Katherine Howard, the Rose Without a Thorn, ended her life in blood and tears, barely 2 years after becoming queen. Her death was more than a personal tragedy. It became a symbol of Tudor cruelty, where a single misstep, a youthful secret, could cost one's life. From that day, Tower Green absorbed yet another layer of darkness, with Catherine's final cries for mercy whispered through history, echoing along the halls of Hampton Court, a heartbreaking reminder of innocence crushed beneath the relentless machinery of power. The death of Katherine Howard did more than end a brief life. It etched an enduring mark on England's collective memory, a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the merciless nature of the Tudor court. She is remembered not as a ruler or a figure of authority, but as a young girl caught in a political maelstrom, crushed beneath the relentless machinery of power. Barely in her late teens, she should have been known for the innocent joys of youth, carefree wanderings, and tender affections. Instead, Catherine became a symbol of sacrifice in a court where every personal misstep was magnified into treason. Had she never been queen, Catherine's life might have unfolded quietly, filled with ordinary yet peaceful moments. A tentative romance with a music tutor, a naive affair with Thomas Culpeper, playful love letters to Dereham, all experiences shared by many young women of her era. But crowned as Queen of England, these same youthful indiscretions became deadly, exploited to the fullest as political tools and warnings to those who followed. Later generations dubbed her the Rose Without a Thorn. Initially, the name celebrated her beauty and innocence, yet over time it came to signify fragility, a delicate flower defenseless amid a court rife with intrigue. She bloomed too quickly in the harsh light of power, only to wither swiftly in a sea of blood, leaving a bitter aftertaste for all who witnessed it. Catherine's tragedy also cast a shadow over the Tudor family itself. Henry VIII, the man who signed her death warrant, descended into gloom, burdened with regret and bitterness. His daughter, Elizabeth, when she took the throne, remained haunted by the fates of Anne Boleyn and Katherine Howard, two women of the same court, both meeting the same grim fate. These memories shaped Elizabeth's famous decision: she would never marry. To her, love and marriage were no longer comforts but deadly perils. Beyond history, Katherine Howard's legacy endures in folklore and legend. At Hampton Court, where she once lived in fleeting splendor, some claim her cries still echo through the night. Legend has it that her spirit roams the dark corridors, racing toward Henry VIII's chambers, pleading for forgiveness, replaying the tragedy that unfolded before her arrest. Across centuries, visitors and guards alike have reported hurried footsteps, heart-wrenching wails, and glimpses of a young woman in white, tears brimming in her eyes. True or not, these tales keep her memory alive in the English imagination, a ghost never fully at rest. Today, Katherine Howard is seldom remembered as a political figure. She endures as a symbol of tragedy. Her story is retold in novels, films, and historical studies, a testament to the cruelty of Tudor power and the vulnerability of youth before authority. She was both a victim of innocence and a product of a society that turned women into instruments of politics. Steeped in sorrow, Katherine Howard's legacy ensures her name will never vanish. In the eyes of posterity, she remains the Rose Without a Thorn, a beautiful, pure flower with no defenses, destined to lose everything, leaving only the echo of a tragedy that will never fade from English history.